The subculture we chose for our subculture project is hippies. What are hippies, you might ask? These are some preconceptions that hippies have. People think they wear tie-dye all the time, all they do is listen to music, do sexual activities, and do drugs, and they rebel a lot. And people also think they're an extension of the 50s beatnik movement. Hippies emphasize peace and culture and carefree attitudes.
So hippies' norms, they really focused on doing their own thing, like whatever you want, whenever you want. They also emphasized dropping out of society because they disagreed with how corrupt America was at that time. They also participated a lot in doing drugs such as marijuana and LSD, and they wanted to guide people to do drugs and to also live in harmony and have fun. But they also disapproved of doing drugs such as amphetamines, barbiturates, opiates, and sometimes cocaine. So hippies believed that America needed a new outlook and new ideas, and they thought that they were the radical change needed to fix the American society. They really questioned Western culture and their politics and everything, and they really focused on communal values over the rights and privileges of individuals. So instead of just thinking about themselves, they thought about everyone as a group. They didn't believe that society needed to be confronted. They didn't think that they needed to solve America being corrupt. They just thought that they needed to withdraw from it. So they didn't like the rise in violence and widespread mental illness, and they only believed their only rational option was to drop out of society altogether.
So hippies spoke English, of course, but they had very different slang, and they used a lot of different words that we wouldn't commonly use. A few examples are chick, which was the most common word for female for them. Instead of saying she, they would say, yo, chick. Electric, they would use the word electric a lot if they would think something was awesome or cool. Flower child would be a description of a person. Long hairs, it's basically, that was another name for hippies. People would call hippies long hairs, or be yo, long hair, come here. Groovy was a really common word they use. It means good, pleasing, or pleasant. Keep the faith was something they would say when they were fighting against war. They didn't want war and they wanted just to establish movement. They would say keep the faith, be peaceful. Symbols that hippies had, their biggest symbol was the peace sign. It symbolized peace for the hippies. They really believed in peace, and they didn't believe in war and conflict. They wanted everything to be peaceful in their society. Another big symbol is the Beatles. Hippies listened to music a lot. It was a really big thing of their culture and their norm. So the Beatles were their cultural icons.
So hippies typically lived in hip communes, because they believed that they needed to drop out of society, so they formed their own little community, which is where they focused on the idea of sharing and creating a society away from American culture. They really emphasized working together and sharing, and just being a community altogether.
Relationships. So age was not a really big factor in being accepted into the hippie culture. Basically, it was just if you wanted to be a hippie, you could come join the culture. They didn't really have any recruitment methods. They just said hey, you want to join? Just come join us. And normally the use of drugs brought them together. So if one person was on drugs, honestly, that just brought them all together. And yeah.
Well, but the hippie culture mostly attracted more of the younger crowd. Yeah. How do hippies differ from popular culture? So, during this time, hippies were viewed as social outcasts, but I feel today in society, the hippie culture is widely accepted. We don't, discriminate against them. The hippie culture, it's not as prevalent, but they lived carefree lifestyles, which you can still see today, and in the 1960s, hippie communes weren't accepted into neighborhoods and hip festivals were banned. But America viewed the hippie culture as a threat to their cultural dominance back then, whereas now it's not as bad.
So preconceptions and bias of hippies would often be like peace signs, they're stoners, always on drugs, long hair. These things aren't really true. Not everyone has long hair, and yeah.
Okay, so is it a subculture or counterculture? So hippies are a counterculture because hippies chose their way of life. They went against American social norms after the Second World War because they were dissatisfied with the culture that had developed. And instead of trying to fix society, they created their own and distanced themselves from, everyone else. So as a result, they established their own towns, economy, political institutions, and societal values.
And this is our works cited page.